Can I say? The man, Kremenik, is going to talk. He's going to take us through this panel. And this audience is amazing. This panelist is amazing. So I'm very excited to get going. I'm not going to take a lot of time. AI and cybersecurity, the good, the bad, the legal. Please enjoy.
Thank you, Solomon. Let me go here. So as Solomon said, this is the AI discussion for the good, the bad, and the legal. We do have some great panelists up here that are going to deliver around 50 minutes of content. Hopefully we can get through the 8 or so questions in which we have aligned to you. And then hopefully open it up for question and answers after that. And I don't know why I used the LinkedIn profile, picture. Yeah, clearly that adds 20 pounds. No, I'm John Kremenik. I'm a security practice lead here with Presidio. I believe Presidio is one of the premier partners for this particular conference, something that we are extremely grateful of. We do believe in this conference, and thank you again, Solomon, for putting it on. A little bit about me for the bio's sake. I started my career about 21 years ago working for the largest law firm in the world. And if you can imagine working for 1,760 of the most pleasant and polite lawyers ever. It was quite the experience, right? But we got to play with some cool toys and cool tech, and we were always bleeding edge. So multifaceted in that particular role, but really got to cut my teeth in security, which I found a passion for. So after 12 years of leading teams on data, network, and security sides of the house, and also global architectural teams, I took a stab here on the OEM side and worked for Cisco for 6 years. So as a technical solutions architect, working with very large enterprises up and down the East Coast, developing cybersecurity programs and efforts behind the scenes, and delivering architectures, very complex architectures on their security stack. And then recently, as of 3 years, I joined Presidio, where I have similar forms and responsibilities that I deliver to customers and clients like yourselves, state and local governments, higher ed, and so forth. But as you can imagine, I think my OEM belt's a little bit bigger, so I get to play with a lot more toys. So I think some of the most recent experiences and projects that Presidio gets to see from clients like yourselves is one of the most interesting stuff is absolutely bound by AI. So I was really looking forward to this session. So I'll swing it over here just for some quick intros and let you guys hear who the panelists are, and then we'll kick off the questions. Larry, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Larry Grant here. I'm a field CTO at Presidio. Kind of that jack of all trades, field CTO here to help you guys with everything from security to cloud migrations to understanding AI and Gen AI. Really been doing Gen AI since its inception, but long before that, been doing data for over 35 years, been doing virtualization and cloud since its inception. Prior to joining Presidio, I worked for one of the largest financials on the planet, where I led their entire cloud migration strategy. And as you can imagine, being a large financial, security was one of the first things that we had to figure out and tackle. So I've been doing security for a long time, cloud for a long time. I'm not jack of all trades, so don't be fooled by the title. I'm a very hands-on technical individual. When I say I've been doing Gen AI since it started, I've literally been doing Gen AI, so I'm still a programmer. I'm still getting my hands on the keyboard. I love this stuff, and I'm really excited to talk with you about it today. So thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Hi, Martha Goodwin. I've been in cybersecurity for just about 20 years now, pretty much since it started, I feel like. My background is mostly in data, endpoint, some networking in there, so a little bit of everything. I currently manage the public sector solutions engineering team at SentinelOne, and a lot of experience with AI. Have been doing AI for about 4 years now, so a little bit of everything, I guess.
Good afternoon, everyone. Maria Thompson. I'm an executive government advisor with Amazon Web Services. I've been with AWS now for 3 years, a little over 3 years. But prior to, I'm a recovering CISO for the state of North Carolina. That's where I know Solomon from. Unfortunately, he's not in recovery as yet. He's still in it. But prior to that, I've been in various security roles in federal organizations, and also 20 years in the United States Marine Corps, where I retired as a cybersecurity chief. So been in the public sector for a long time, and I always like to throw that out that I've seen some things. So happy to be on this panel.
I'm Bill Denny. I'm a partner with the Wilmington, Delaware law firm Potter, Anderson, and Caroon. And John, you said something about pleasant and polite lawyers.
Absolutely.
And I'm not clear whether that was a redundancy or an oxymoron. My practice area is in cybersecurity, data privacy, data governance. I've practiced in general transactional works where I've helped companies negotiate, review, draft contracts. I've also helped in technology-related disputes, and we have a deep bench of experience and knowledge in this area. And I'm pleased to have been involved in speaking at this program annually since its inception.
Wow. That's awesome. All right. I think I got the clicker here. All right, so let's kick it off for the first question. Level setting, what AI actually is and what it means to you. And if you ask my daughter this morning, it was Alexa. And if you ask my son, it was, the Terminator. And talking to Larry, it's completely different. So LLMs and Gen AI and what that actually is. So if, Larry, maybe you can kick that question off.
Sure, I'll try and take a best stab at it. So when we think about AI, we think about machine learning, deep learning. These things aren't new. They've been around for years. We have data scientists out there, mathematicians, statisticians, people that really understand numbers. And the work that they've been doing for many, many years has been very deterministic, right? They're creating algorithms, and those algorithms are producing very deterministic results. Same data in, same answer out every time. And that's been great to allow me to build very complex algorithms to do very specific tasks. They weren't very general purpose. Fast forward 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when we all started to hear about ChatGPT and products like that, we started hearing about what's called generative AI. What some people may or may not appreciate is that generative AI is really AI on top. It's a component on top of AI. And all the hard work's been done in the model. So as a model, consumers can utilize it very easily. So we see solutions, applications like ChatGPT, like Gemini from Google, right? That allow me to interact with it on a very human way. And because I can interact with it in a very human way and get a non-deterministic answer, it feels much more like I'm interacting with a human, right? We can ask the same human in this room the same question, and not only will every one of you probably give me a slightly different answer to some question, if I ask the same person the same question, you're probably going to give me a different answer the second time. The meaning might be the same, but you're not going to remember exactly verbatim every word you spoke. You're going to change up, you're going to choose different words each time. We see that in generative AI, right? It's leveraging a model to predict the next word in a non-deterministic way. So it feels much more human, much more interactive. The biggest difference, though, is that it's generating new content, which is something that we've not traditionally seen before. It's taking its vast database of information that it's been trained on and answering questions. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself with what I anticipate some of the next few questions to be. But by being able to be generative, it allows it to evolve beyond what traditional AI might have been, right? It's starting to look more like what we see in sci-fi movies. It's not there yet, nor does it need to be scary. It's just something that we need to be aware of, and something that I'm really excited for, but I'm also scared for the future. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, as we go on. So with that, I'll stop there and hand it over to
Maria.
Marie.
Yeah, so I think that was a great description of what AI and Gen AI brings, and I can't really add more to that. I guess just to make it more concise, I guess, is the fact that from an AI perspective, think about those large data sets that you have, the ability to leverage all of that data that you have within an organization to provide a particular service, and it mimics human intelligence. These types of things that basically we can't do at scale. The machine, the large language models can do at scale. And of course, Gen AI, just as you said, you're able to generate new content. And I'm sure if those of you that are on TikTok or any of those reels, you're seeing a lot of information out there that you're like, is this real or is it, Gen AI? And chances are there's a lot of, information that's being put out there that is being newly developed that's not actually the picture that it should be. So I'll say that. But the other thing that I want to add real quickly is, when I think about Gen AI and what it means to me, I think about the opportunities that it brings. And I think you heard from the previous speaker how he spoke about the bad things that Gen AI and AI is being used for. But I think about the opportunities that it brings to an organization when you think about how you can increase the efficiencies of your business, the customer service, the experience of your customers. All of those things can really be, heightened and optimized. I think it's truly a transformative technology, and we need to embrace it because, as you heard, the bad guys are using it. So we need to make sure that we're using it for good so that we're going counter to it. Now, if it's not done correctly, then you can run into issues, of course, and we're going to cover some of those, guardrails that need to be put in place to ensure that you are doing it correctly. But I would always say, don't fear it. Embrace it because it is here, and we definitely need to use it.
Great. So I think that kind of leads directly into, kind of how are we seeing AI used and how is it impacting use? So some of those examples are very great, right? So just continuing on with that flow, what are we seeing in our organizations? What are we seeing from our clients in which we interact with, right? So what's kind of that good in there?
Yeah, thank you, John. So I work with a lot of different clients out there and customers, and we're seeing AI really utilized for the mundane tasks, the intensive tasks, whether it's data gathering, you have your help desk where a lot of information, you're looking for information and you're going through all these knowledge-based articles. If you're utilizing AI, it can actually parse that information much quicker. It makes your team more efficient. AI is not going to replace your people. You still need human reasoning. But what we're seeing is if you can utilize AI to do some of the mundane tasks, I know we all have a shortage. There is not enough cybersecurity professionals out there to fill all the open positions that there are. So if we can up-level the existing people we have and be able to train them more effectively utilizing AI, and by gathering the information they need, I don't know how many different roles everyone in this room has, but say you're an IR practitioner and you're researching you're threat hunting and you're researching a breach. If the AI can go and gather all of your forensics data, all of your memory dumps, all of the stuff that you would normally gather that would take you hours and hours to do, get all that information automatically and have the human look through the information and do the reasoning, that's really what you want. You're not going to replace the humans, but you're going to up-level them. You're going to make their job more efficient. You're going to make it easier. And, I use that example for the threat hunting IR. Like I said, support is another one, whether it's internal support, external support. A customer calls you, and when I say customer, help desk, everyone who works in your organization is your customer. I used to do help desk back in the 90s, so those are your customers. When they call and they have a problem and you don't know it, AI is going to help you. And that's where I'm seeing it utilized in the cybersecurity and the technology space right now.
Great. I'll add too as well, just getting outside of the IT world, we're present in a project for developing an AI strategy around new hires, right? So state and local governments obviously get into a lot of regulatory requirements, especially around the people that they're hiring. So looking at historicals, when it came to the business in which we were evaluating, taking those historicals, then adding on the newer requirements as time evolves to those particular job kind of postings. And it's really, it's really adoptive, not just in IT, but certainly in HR and so forth, right? So really cool stuff.
Can I just add a couple
sure.
more use cases to that? Because what we're seeing, especially from an AWS perspective, we're seeing a huge increase in use use cases where, like for example, emergency call diversions. And this is cybersecurity, but when you think about these call centers, these 911 call centers, whether you're calling the non-emergency number or you're calling the emergency number, guess what? If you have two people in there answering the calls, guess what? Those calls are going into those same two people. So now you have these chat bots that are able to divert and answer those non-emergency calls and take the load off of the call center attendants that are answering these calls. So we're seeing a lot of call centers adopting technologies like that. And we're also seeing from intelligent document processing. For example, there is I think it's the LA County Defender's Office that was able to take 120 million records from over like 23 different data sets and be able to aggregate that and be able to cut down on the manual intensive workloads that organizations are doing. So there's a lot of work within the public sector where AI is being of value and showing, I guess providing that enhanced customer experience and also optimizing their business.
Great. Thank you. All right. Let's go to the next one. I can't flip. Lori, can you flip that one? Lori, is Lori around? We'll just go to the next question until we can figure that out. Sorry, guys. Oh. So what new capabilities do you expect AI to deliver? So given the volatility and just explosiveness of kind of what we're seeing in the industry, and it's great, it's remarkable, and some of the new things that are being developed, you really have to read the news every single day, right? So Larry, what are you seeing out there for new capabilities being delivered by AI?
Thanks. This one's a doozy. Let me ask the audience, show of hands, who's a skeptic on Gen AI still?
Nice.
Okay. And who's a believer? It's surprisingly about 50-50, I'd say.
I saw the same people answering both.
That could be too. Some are still undecided.
Ask ChatGPT.
When I reflect back 2 years ago when Gen AI really started to emerge with ChatGPT, lots of skeptics out there. And I was on the fence. I was like, well, is this just trick foolery, or is this really something special? And if you look at the achievements we've already had over the last 2.5 years that you guys may not be aware of, a new cancer cure was discovered, right? Nobel laureate doctor, scientist was working for, I believe, 10 years, but it was a while, trying to find a cure for cancer. And with the help of generative AI, actually discovered the cure. A potential cure. Brand new antibiotic was discovered. Now we've had antibiotic like strains discovered, but not net new antibiotics in nearly 40 years. But with the help of Gen AI, found a new antibiotic. And with the antibiotic strains becoming stronger and stronger, we need new antibiotics to stay ahead of it. So there's been some really remarkable breakthroughs already with Gen AI. When you consider what it's really good at, right? It's really good at ingesting information and then discerning that information. If you consider how long it takes a human to read, say, the first Harry Potter book, right? It takes an average human between 6 and 7 hours if they read straight through without falling asleep. It's hard to do, but it could be done. Gen AI solutions can read an entire Harry Potter book in seconds, right? So it can ingest data, whether it's ingesting it real time or ingesting it as a post-process of some sort. It's able to take in information and process that information much, much faster. So when I think about what's coming, I think about when we had our first flight with the Wright brothers to the time we put a man on the moon. What was it? It was 60-some years. When I look back, and I was 40 years ago, driving, we used paper maps to get everywhere. Today, we can't get anywhere without our phones, without Waze or MapQuest, or I'm aging myself, Google Maps.
MapQuest.
Google Maps. I remember back when my school teacher used to get on my case back in the day with math class, saying, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket. You have to learn long form. And nobody today in this room doesn't not have a calculator in their pocket, right? So when I think about the future, depending on how far out we want to look, right? I mean, any sci-fi movie you've watched in the last 10 years, yeah, that's happening now, right? I mean, this is for real. We've seen it becoming more and more real. So for me as a grandfather, I'm not worried about today's jobs. My children are fine. You guys are fine. I'm worried about my grandkids, right? What's their future going to look like? If I went to the moon in 60 years, what's 20 years from now going to look like, right? We're growing exponentially. Things are getting exponentially faster. The pandemic showed us that we can teach remotely. So what's that mean for teachers in 20 years? Are we going to have AI teachers? We're definitely going to have AI assistants. We're going to have AI tutors, right? That can be very specific to any subject the individual has. We're going to have, we already see today we're using AI for programming. Today, programmers are using AI to make their jobs easier. Some non-programmers that are handy are using AI to help them write code. Maybe in 5 years, that's it. No more programmers. I mean, maybe that's extreme, depending on who you talk to, but it's definitely happening. We're going to see programming phased out for generative automated programming. Family doctors. We're seeing now, I live up in Pennsylvania, and we see in one of the local malls an automated medical device that you can kind of walk into, close the door, it runs thousands of scans of you interactively and tells you about your health, right? And eventually will probably replace family practitioners. Today you can call your doctor on the phone and do a web conference instead of meeting them in person. Eventually you're going to be just talking to an AI. Pharmacists, could be replaced someday with robots. Financial advisors, we're already seeing Gen AI outperforming financial advisors. I mean, it's really, I don't want to scare anybody, and there's a part of me that's excited for this technology, and a part of me that is really nervous about this technology because, with great power comes great responsibility. And how do we stay responsible as this technology grows and becomes more mature? So I hope that's in line with the question, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and that lines us up, right? So we are talking about risk and, risk specific to AI development. Let's talk a little bit about the compliance and data privacy and potentially threat actors trying to get in here, right? So where's the risk associated to doing something like this?
I think the first thing that I would say about the risks associated with AI is that, everything starts with data, right? And having a strong foundation of data governance, making sure that you know where your data sits, making sure that your data is trusted, it's validated. And I know that in speaking with customers across the nation, that's one of the things that is of concern, as they think about AI and what they should do with AI. So I think my first recommendation just to everyone here that as you think about that, think about your data. What should you use within AI? Should you use sensitive data? I would not recommend doing that, especially if you're using it in an open source type solution like ChatGPT or anything like that. But if you're using an enterprise grade AI application that is purposely built for your organization, that is in a closed environment, then that might be a risk that you're willing to take. But when you think about AI, you think about all those things that could go off the rails, right? You've heard about those hallucinations, for example, when it completely makes up something, and how do you know when it's hallucinating? How do you test against that? There's toxicity. What if it starts to say things that are maybe disparaging to a certain member of your community? These types of things that you have to be prepared for. And I think that as we learn more about AI and the risks associated with AI from a data leak prevention type perspective, from a data cleansing perspective, from how do we create those guardrails to make sure that we protect and make sure that we understand what the data is, what the large language model is doing, that we make sure that we build these guardrails in place. And there's ways to do that. We've identified, for the most part, majority of the issues associated with and the risks associated with AI. We just got to make sure that you are putting those mitigation steps in place. Like, for example, making sure your teams are diverse. if your teams are not diverse, you're probably going to run into an AI model that might be biased. And you may, who knows, you may have some toxicity built into that. You want to make sure that your data is protected. So before you actually build, use your data within a large language model, you identify what that data looks like, classify the data, make sure that if there's sensitive data or intellectual property that you don't want to be built into that data that could potentially be misused and abused by someone else, that you make sure that that is not included in the data sets that's used to train that model. But I would really recommend that if you're using enterprise solutions, that you do go in with a strong data governance and data strategy around that before you actually engage in this whole process. Now, if you're using, I would say, the open source type solutions out there, obviously you don't want to put any kind of intellectual property out there. You don't want to put any kind of sensitive information in a ChatGPT type model or any of those open source solutions out there, because guess what? Once it's out there for good, forever. And it's going to take an act of Congress, probably more than that, to pull that back. So, and we had those horror stories. I'm sure you can Google right now and you'll find that there are stories out there of organizations that have done that without knowing. So making sure that you have a policy in place to ensure that you have those technical guardrails in place, as well as those training, education to your workforce, so they understand, one, the risks, and then how should they mitigate those risks and what steps they should take so that they can act in accordance.
You've named a lot of very important risks, and there are many others. I feel like we are the Debbie Downers of this presentation after hearing about how wonderful AI is. One of the problems with AI is lack of transparency. That is, the decision-making process is complex, and it's difficult to interpret. How is the AI tool making its decision? It can lead to distrust. Another is, Larry talked about all of the jobs that are going to be displaced by AI, and that necessarily leads to economic inequality, where the big companies and bigger companies that are controlling the AI are going to become very wealthy and displace low-skilled workers. Also, as we use AI for everything more and more in the future, we will become dependent on AI, and this over-reliance may lead to a loss of creativity, a loss of critical thinking skills, and human intuition. What happens, and I don't know if you've looked at these statistics, but a tremendous amount of new content on the internet is generated by Gen AI. And it's very difficult to tell what is real data from a human and what is synthetic data from an AI tool. And if an AI tool is sweeping lots of data into its training data set, it could be sweeping in information which is generated by AI, and that becomes a closed loop situation, and the information output will then begin to degenerate and approach the mean. So you won't get the variety of responses that you're getting today, when most of the information is what I would call original information. There's also the danger of misinformation and manipulation. I don't know if any of you are aware of it, but there are bad actors in the world. And these hackers and malicious actors can harness the power of AI to develop more advanced cyber attacks. And the loss of human control in the decision-making process makes that a very big risk. There's also something called deepfakes, and that's generated by AI, and it contributes to the spread of false information and manipulation of public opinion. I don't know if that's a timely topic.
Just a little bit.
No. But I think that the thing is that you're seeing that there is a counter to everything, right? And I think that even though there are so much negative, aspects around AI, there's so many positives as well. And then if we don't embrace it, we're going to run into a zero-sum game, especially when we talk about cybersecurity and being able to mitigate those risks. When you think about that CrowdStrike report, it takes 62 minutes to breakout time, which is 62 minutes for them to compromise your environment and start to spread laterally. And usually I ask that question, which organization can identify, detect, protect, respond, and not recover yet, but respond to a threat within 62 minutes? Generally, no one puts their hands up. But the only way that we're able to do that is to leverage technology that can bring that harness, that mean time to detect and respond to us.
Great stuff. Let's go to the next one. So, talking about that, right? So the balance, right? Either allowing AI to do automation for us, or with the concept of oversight from a human in cybersecurity decision-making processes. So, how do you balance the potential of allowing AI to do automation with cybersecurity oversight?
So I think this is a really important question. I do think that in some cases, and I think you had mentioned this earlier, AI has been around for a long time. It's only become public knowledge or public focus since ChatGPT, but we've been utilizing AI in cybersecurity for a very long time. Machine learning, UEBA, behavior analysis, all of that is AI generated. You are looking at patterns. You are utilizing algorithms to figure out what's normal and what's not. That is what AI is doing. It's taking and ingesting all of that data and figuring out what looks different. So we've been utilizing it for a long time, and we've been doing great with the balancing. What we're seeing now is there's more data to ingest. There's so much more, and you talked about the 62 minutes. You're looking at all this data and you're trying to figure out, how am I going to respond? I worked with a security operations center a few years ago. It was an MSSP, and they were literally receiving over 1,000 alerts per second per analyst. So the analyst had to figure out quickly, which one am I responding to and which one am I not? So that's not a good situation to be in. AI can help you determine which ones to respond to. You do need to keep a balance. You do not want the machine to figure everything out and make the decision for you and fix it for you. You do need the human oversight because, as we've all said, there's also cybersecurity risks sometimes depending on what you're utilizing for your large language model, depending on what product you're using. You want to trust but verify. It is not an open loop. You don't want it to be, oh, let's just have the AI do it. So the balancing act is, let the AI get all that information and make the first decision for you, give you all of the reasons why it made that decision, and let the human actually go forward and make that decision. Just like if we're talking about, earlier we were talking about medical, and I know this one's more about cybersecurity, but if you can utilize AI to gather all that information to be able to come up with a cure for cancer, are you still going to test that? Of course you are. You're not going to just believe it, oh, it came up with a cure for cancer, now let's give this to everyone we know. No, you're still going to, you have that information, now you're going to go through it and you're actually going to test and validate it. And that you need the human element for. So I do believe, at least for now, we humans are still very relevant in this conversation. And I think it's about that balancing act with utilizing AI for the drudgery, getting all the information, all that data ingestion, because there is so much data to go through, whether you're talking medical, you're talking cybersecurity. There's a lot of different industries that have data, to the point where I've actually heard a customer say data is our new currency. The data we collect from both our customers and ourselves is our currency. That is more valuable than anything else. And so you want to protect that data, but you want to also be able to utilize that data, and you can't utilize it using humans. It's just not possible. There's too much of it.
That's awesome, Martha. I like what I'm hearing, but there's a few things I want to add. We've been talking mostly about Gen AI and large language models and what the model does or does not do well. What we've not talked about is the practical application of how these things are being implemented. It's very rare, unless you're using a consumer-grade ChatGPT endpoint, where you ask a question, you get back an answer from the model, and that's it. Most applications that you're going to develop from an enterprise standpoint are what we call agentic-based AI. It's AI talking to AI, talking to AI. And with that, we're building out what's called guardrails. And the idea of guardrails is humans are defining rules. They're defining the guardrails, the train rails, whatever you want to call it, that control limits of what the Gen AI does. So let's say I'm using Gen AI and I'm using it for a corporate application, and I'm in no way affiliated with any political affiliation. Well, I want to make sure this thing doesn't talk about politics. So I need to define guardrails so it knows to stay focused on my business, my function, my application. A public large language model doesn't know that. It's trained on everything, and it can answer just about anything, right or wrong. We get scared about hallucinations. I'm not so scared on hallucinations because a hallucination is very similar to a human. You ask me a question, and I may sound authoritative, like I'm standing up here now talking to you about how great Gen AI is. But am I making stuff up? I might be. You don't know whether I'm making things up, right? That's really what an LLM is doing when it's hallucinating, right? It's looking at its plethora of information and kind of saying my best guess estimate is this is the right answer, but it may be completely wrong because it wasn't trained on enough information to be authoritative, but it acts like it's authoritative. When we start to look at agentic AI and when we start to look at guardrails, we're programmatically putting those checks into the application. So we're checking the request. Is the request, the prompt, in line with the application that it's servicing? Is the answer in line with the question that was asked? Let me go back if it's not and actually check again. So like you may have heard of OpenAI's new O1 release. And the big thing about O1 is not so much about the model, it's more about the application. We'll start to see that popping up more and more and more applications, having that ability to check itself. And then when I think about, the human oversight, to me, if I want to react fast, right, if it's a security and a cybersecurity threat, I may not have time for human oversight. But I want to know that the humans define the guardrails and define the rules such that I can more confidently trust what the Gen AI is doing. And one last piece to that is we haven't talked about RAG. And not wanting to get too technical, but RAG is retrieval augmented generation, and it ties in to me very closely with guardrails because RAG is where you define your data that defines your business or your application or your function. And when you use RAG in conjunction with models, even public models, you're really focusing it on the specific set of data that matters. So even though it's been trained on the entire world of data, when you use RAG, you're telling it, use your worldly data to write a concise response, but keep the response within the realm of this information. So with the power of RAG and with the power of guardrails, I think we're going to see more and more confidence build up in allowing for the automation.
Good stuff. All right. Now for the fun part, Bill. I didn't mean what I said about lawyers. Now,
Do you take it back?
yeah. The question is, if my AI-driven car is hallucinating and we get pulled over at a DUI checkpoint, who's getting fined there? So what laws apply to your use of AI and legal compliance obligations? And I know this is pretty much your passion, so love to hear about that in a little bit. I know we picked 10 minutes for that, but maybe 8 of it.
Sure. That's a very broad question.
Very broad.
The legal landscape is changing rapidly and very dramatically. So what I'm going to do is talk for a few minutes on what laws, what are some of the main laws that apply to the use of AI, and what are your legal compliance obligations. And I think that by attending this conference, you're most interested in your legal compliance obligations. So the first and best law so far relating to AI came from the European Union, just as it did with privacy and the GDPR. it passed the European Union AI Act, which is a robust and comprehensive regulatory framework. We don't have anything like it in the U.S., but it is creating a model for laws around the world to follow, including laws within the U.S. And so it's a guidepost for the direction of legal development. I would say, first of all, it focuses, as many of the new laws focus, on generative AI, as opposed to other flavors and categories of AI. Under the AI Act, generative AI systems are categorized based on risk, with high-risk systems subject to stringent transparency, oversight, and human intervention requirements. And then there are lower levels of risk. The law also requires accountability in the development of generative AI to assure safety and privacy and that fundamental rights are being honored. And I think Larry might have mentioned that earlier, that many of these protections need to be involved in the development stage. There needs to be privacy and security and transparency by design in the building of the product. It focuses on transparency and on protection of intellectual property, that is, what information goes into the training data sets and is captured, and what information might be coming from the output. Also, it deals with ethical generative AI deployment, risk management, and consumer protection. So if we come over to stateside, there are many laws. The first state that passed a specific AI-related law is Colorado. It passed the Colorado Generative AI Copyright Disclosure Act, and that focuses very narrowly on the use of copyrighted works in training AI models. It requires the company that's using the AI or building the AI to disclose its use of copyrighted works in the training model and notify the U.S. Copyright Office, including where the material was acquired. And that information is all put into a public database cataloging disclosures. And so companies or individuals who own copyrighted works can look and see whether anybody has used it. There's nothing in there about data privacy or ethical AI practices. California just passed its AI-related law called AB 2013, and it requires that the company using AI disclose the intellectual property used in the training data set, similar to Colorado. Also, whether personal information is used, and so it gets more into the privacy side. It requires companies to maintain detailed documentation and publish summaries of that documentation to its user base. It's also requiring retroactive disclosure of training data sets, and this can be very onerous to companies that might not have records that are reaching back in time. The United States issued an executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of AI. And while this executive order is not mandatory guidance for many companies, it is directional as far as where the development is coming, and it is mandatory with respect to a number of government agencies. It directs NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, to issue guidelines, standards, and best practices on AI safety and security. And NIST has done that and has put out very helpful guidelines. It focuses on companies with dual-use foundational models and large-scale computing clusters, and they're asked to report their activities to the government. Federal agencies are required to assess risks and the use of AI. The Federal Trade Commission is involved in all kinds of commerce, and under its power to regulate unfair and deceptive trade practices, it's warned companies to keep your AI claims in check and not to engage in what's called AI washing. And I had to look this one up, but AI washing is stating that your AI tool is better than it is, and that can easily happen. Avoid exaggeration in making false promises and proactively manage your risk. Comprehensive state privacy laws have been passed in 20 states so far, including Delaware. Delaware's law comes into effect on January 1 of 2025. And the privacy laws impact AI significantly. You think about AI as gathering inputs and producing outputs. Well, on the gathering input sides, it involves problems of data scraping, which is how is the data collected? Are you complying with obligations of data minimization? Are you providing proper notice to data subjects, obtaining consent where necessary, implementing safeguards, stating the specific purpose of use of the information, adhering to purpose limitations, and respecting individual rights, and observing data retention limits? All of these obligations under privacy laws are going to be difficult to comply with. And then with respect to producing outputs, this involves problems of data generation. There is automated decision-making without human intervention. And under some laws, that requires opt-in by a consumer or opt-out by a consumer, depending on the state. How do you affect that when you're using a generative AI tool? There are issues of profiling and bias. The automated decision-making, which is based on personal data, can have a significant real-life effect. And analyzing large data sets can lead to stereotyping groups based on the bias of information that comes in. Mass surveillance becomes much more powerful with data analytics on a vast scale. There are informational issues where personal data collected and stored by an AI tool is vulnerable to breach and to disclosure, and the difficulty of complying with the transparency laws in data privacy so that a data subject could ask for, tell me what information you have about me, and even ask for it to be corrected or deleted. On the compliance side, I've got a checklist. I love checklists. Who is in charge first? Who is in charge of AI compliance in your organization? It could be an individual or a governing board responsible for developing, implementing, and monitoring AI law compliance and risk mitigation programs. Second, do you know your AI? Have you reviewed key internal and external systems and confirmed which are programmed deterministically and which qualify as AI? The definition of AI is not so clear-cut. Many laws define it, but it's defined differently in different circumstances. Have you analyzed which AI should be developed internally and which you should get from vendors or publicly available sources? Third, have you documented impact assessments and risk mitigation measures? Legal assessment should be under attorney-client privilege to determine what your compliance requirements are and address your risks, including bias. The documentation is required by regulation in many cases, and also you should have it as a defense in case of incidents or legal challenges. Fourth, do you keep systems and data confidential and secure? You should have a security protocol that describes physical, technical, and organizational data security measures, including access control and encryption. Select your service providers carefully and monitor them, and make sure your data retention and deletion programs are in operation and monitored. Fifth, have you signed adequate data processing agreements with your AI providers? There are a number of requirements under privacy laws that require you to have very tight contracts with vendors in order to come within the protection provided by those laws. Also, you need to make sure that you have proper risk mitigation in place for how your vendor is using AI, what its training data sets are, what's happening to your data, is it protected? Sixth, have you issued necessary warnings and required notices and obtained consent where required? This would include disclosing automatic decision-making, the use of AI chatbots, and Also, just-in-time warnings to users to reduce the risk of AI misuse. And do you have processes in place to respond to security incidents or to data subject requests? These are just some of the items that are critical to make sure you're in compliance with law.
Great. And yes, that is, I think we had following questions, right, that were kind of relative to guardrails and the policies in which, our panelists believe you guys to kind of take away from this kind of experience. And certainly I think Bill was really on the spot here. So to the remainder of our panelists, I do apologize. We're getting the axe here from the boss over here, and I think we'll conclude it now. We had started late, so our apologies on that. But certainly we'll be around. If you do have any further questions here around AI and development of AI efforts within your own organizations, happy to answer them too. So hopefully you enjoyed the panelist session and enjoy the rest of the conference. So thank you.